Story 1. My ex-husband and his family smoked a lot of marijuana. They still do. His sister, their children, and the nanny were visiting from out of state for a few weeks. When it was time to fly home, they left their stash at my ex-mother-in-law's house because they did not want to take it on the plane. My ex asked if I would pick it up because I was nearby. Stupidly, I agreed. I do not smoke and was willing to carry it in my car for him. To my surprise, I found a note from the nanny to my ex saying she was in love with him and was happy for the time they had together. She had obviously assumed he would get the marijuana instead of me. It was incredibly painful at the time, but 15 years later I am definitely living my best life. Story 2. My ex-husband was an early adopter of sending explicit photos. I got his phone to get the numbers of his friends to invite them to a surprise birthday party while he was sleeping off a hangover. There they were in his outbox. Edited to add. This was more than 12 years ago when camera phones were barely functional. Story 3. The worst one I know of was an acquaintance who came home from work one day and found his partner having sex with his father. It blew up all over Facebook and became a local drama where people tried to organize a shunning of both of them. I remember it well. I know people cheat, but with your partner's father? Come on. Story 4. My wife was acting unusually for a few weeks. She wanted to spend time alone on weekends, and when she came home from work at night, she often sat in the driveway on the phone for 20 minutes. I am not stupid. I bought a voice-activated digital recorder and placed it in her car. I learned what I needed to know in less than 24 hours. Story 5. I was in the Navy and deployed for 6 months shortly after getting engaged. It was one of those stupid things young military guys do. One day, I received a letter from my fiancé's best friend saying she had caught my fiancé with her boyfriend. This was years before email and smartphones were common. We wrote back and forth several times, and the friend explained how she caught them, how my fiancé begged her not to tell me, and that my fiancé did not know we were corresponding. When I returned to the United States, I had planned to act as if I did not know, but many friends told me it was not just the one man but several, and that my fiancé knew I was aware. Eventually we met. The confrontation was minimal and tame. We broke off the engagement without a lot of drama. She kept the ring. The best friend and I ended up together. At first it was a revenge fling, but it became serious. We will celebrate our 31st wedding anniversary this year. After 20 years, it is all a blur. Story 6. I had some very good friends in the next town where my girlfriend lived, and they figured it out for me. They were gentle about it and patient with me during my denial. Story 7. My ex was a heavy drinker and I was not. She frequented a bar near our place with friends. I rarely went because I disliked bars and her drinking companions. One night she went out with a couple I did not mind much. Bored at home, I decided to stop by. When I walked in, I saw her sitting at the bar with them. The bar was packed, and as soon as our eyes met, she gave a strange look. She turned to the man beside her, and he immediately got up and left. I felt something odd but brushed it off as irrational. I stayed about an hour and then went home. I could not shake the feeling, so I checked one of her friends' Facebook pages to see if there was any connection between my ex and the man. Sure enough, he was friends with one of her friends. Knowing his name, I realized I was not as crazy as I had thought. I kept the information to myself. The next weekend she went out drinking again and had not returned by 4 in the morning. I tried contacting her several times with no response. She came home at 7 in the morning and jumped in the shower immediately. While she was showering, I checked her phone and found she had kept all the messages with the same man. The text thread contained some telling information. I grabbed a fresh pair of clothes and went to my best friend's house. 20 minutes later, I received a phone call from her. Furious that I had left without saying anything, I laughed at the projection and told her that if she had not moved out by Monday, the police would be there to force her out. She was not on the lease and her parents lived 10 minutes away. That was that. Story 8. We were together for 5 years and lived together for around 4. I came home from work early. As I got out of my car, I saw her peeking through the blinds to see who was outside. I walked in and found her coworker on the couch, clearly uncomfortable and disheveled, while she was locked in the bathroom. I wanted to pummel him then and there, but he was a trained mixed martial arts fighter, and I would have left the house that night with more than a broken heart. I went to a friend's house for a while. They started dating the next day. This was devastating, and it took me a while to regain trust in relationships. Her coworker had been to many gatherings. No, I would not have attacked the woman even though she was more deserving. Thank you all for the comments. It was more than 10 years ago and I am doing well. Story 9. I went for my yearly checkup and tested positive for chlamydia. Turned out my ex was sleeping around. Apparently, false positives are common with these types of tests, so have your significant other tested as well. I hope you are in a relationship where you can openly talk about these things. Story 10. He went to Hawaii for a business trip without his wife and children. Like a good wife, I packed his clothes before he left and unpacked his dirty laundry when he returned home. I found a tiny pair of white cotton panties with no lace in his suitcase. He had recently lost more than 100 pounds and played it off by saying he had bought them for himself. They had no label and were simple bikini-style underwear, so theoretically they could have been men's as well. It did explain, to some extent, the pretty brunette who followed him off the plane and kept looking at my children and me at the luggage carousel. What an idiot to bring his mistress face to face with his wife and children. I made sure he wore those panties at least once a week for the remaining few months we were together. I set out his clothes every day and he could not protest. Story 11. She confessed to her mother. Her mother-in-law then told her other daughter. Her sister-in-law called me and let me listen to a three-way call with their mother. She tried to persuade the mother to tell me, but the mother refused, which effectively confirmed it. Story 12. It wasn't a single dam-breaking moment but a lot of little things. She would cancel plans at the last second, get random calls from unknown numbers, and one night her phone was mysteriously off when I needed to reach her. I had my suspicions, and it finally clicked when I did some Instagram snooping and found a man who followed her and had posted a selfie wearing a jacket that belonged to her. I confronted her the next day. She denied it, cried, and begged. I broke up with her and walked away. The next day I messaged the man on Instagram. He confirmed everything, said he had no idea I existed, and he broke up with her too. Last I heard, she is an emergency medical technician in Wyoming. I hope she has figured out how not to be a garbage person. Story 13. 4 years ago, I was dating a woman who became distant and lost interest in many things we had enjoyed together. Despite attempts to discuss it, she grew more withdrawn, became less available to hang out, and suddenly was working late a lot. I became suspicious of cheating when she was on her phone constantly. I tried to talk about it again, but she would not engage. She also did not want to break up with me for whatever reason. I was planning to end it myself, but one weekend when she seemed unavailable, some mutual friends told me they had seen her with a man from her workplace, and they were very affectionate. Coincidentally, she had lent me her iPad, which was synced to her phone, so I saw many texts between them that weekend. They were even talking about running away together and so on. He was married and was her supervisor. Our mutual friends, who were also her coworkers, reported them to Human Resources. They were required to attend training about workplace relationships. Both were denied promotions, his wife left him, and she moved overseas. It was painful at the time and I was devastated, but in the end they faced consequences. Story 14. This isn't my story, it's my parents'. My mom had a boyfriend when my parents met, and she broke up with him to be with my dad. About 10 years later, they were married with 2 kids, my older brother and me. She traveled for work fairly often and started taking trips to see a friend in Chicago. I was young enough that I don't really remember when it started, but I noticed my dad was really irritable on those weekends. I think I was about 12 when I realized what was going on. I figured it out before my brother did. I used to sit at the top of the stairs and listen to my parents argue. I don't even remember if I heard something that gave it away, if it slowly dawned on me as I grew up, or if one day it just hit me. It has always been part of my life that my mom lies. She still does. My dad used to beg me not to say anything to her that I knew because, first, he was desperate to keep the family together, and second, my mom would get on his case for getting the kids involved. No joke. One day, the summer after I graduated high school, I came home from work to find my mom in the garage loading up her car. I asked why she was putting blankets in the car. She went quiet for a moment and said she was moving out. I just went inside. Later, she texted my dad that she had moved to her brother's house. That's how he found out. They had been married for 20 years, and she sent him a text message. I don't know if she was planning on telling me at all if I had not happened to come home when I did, or if she would have just disappeared. There have been times when she left without telling me where she was. I would realize I hadn't seen my mother in a few days and ask my dad where she was, and he would say, "Oh, she didn't tell you? She's in Montreal for a week," or something like that. So anything was possible. Edit. This thread had around 300 comments when I started typing, and by the time I posted it was at 1,300, so this will probably get buried. Laughing out loud. Story 15. June 1st, 2018 was a normal Friday. My husband had kissed me goodbye and gone to work. I was cleaning the house for guests who were coming to stay for the weekend when the doorbell rang. A man stood at the door and introduced himself as the husband of a woman my husband worked with. He told me that my husband and his wife were having an affair. He had discovered them about 6 months earlier and had told his wife to end the affair. He thought she did end it for about 3 months, but then they started again. When he found out they were together again, he called my husband because he knew that if he confronted him in person he would be jailed for what he might do. On the phone he told my husband to leave his wife alone or he would come and tell me everything. Apparently my husband thought he was bluffing. I was the last to know. My husband never came home again. He moved into an Airbnb rental and hired a lawyer. The divorce was finalized on December 21st, 2018. We had been together for 24 years. It still hurts. Story 16. I owned a house with my fiancé. I woke up in the middle of the night and he was not in bed, so I went searching. His truck and another vehicle were in the driveway. I went upstairs and found the guest bedroom locked. After forcing my way in, I found him in bed with another woman. The bed was my childhood bed. He forced me out of the room, grabbing me by the neck, pushing me out, and closing the door. I knew I could not do anything, so I called his parents, who lived a few blocks away. His father arrived and another fight broke out. I left and stayed at his parents' house until dawn. I moved out that weekend and let the house go into foreclosure. 9 years later, it is finally off my credit report. I am happily married to an amazing man and we own a beautiful home together. Story 17. Summary. My ex-husband was sleeping with his best friend's wife while I was 8 months pregnant. It had been going on for a while. I was 8 months pregnant with our second child and he wanted to visit his brother for the weekend. I asked my doctor if it was safe for me to travel, and she said it would be fine. I told my husband I could go, but he said he was hoping to have some time with his brother. I understood because a new baby makes it hard to spend quality time, but I asked if he could take our older son, who was 3 at the time, so he could see his grandmother and cousins. He said they planned to drink and go shooting and was not sure it would be a good idea. I agreed and he left for the weekend. After he left, I received a call from his best friend who said he would be in town for the weekend and wanted to meet up. It was not strange that he called me because my husband was terrible at answering his phone. I told him my husband was visiting back home and that it was bad timing. The friend said okay and that he would call back, and then he hung up abruptly. Later I learned that the friend had caught my husband with the friend's wife a few months earlier. He had given them a chance to stop and had threatened to tell if they did not. They continued and he finally told me. The worst part was that my husband's family knew and never once told me. These people had been my family for 5 years and said nothing. It has been almost 10 years now, and I am much happier, but it was definitely an eye-opening experience. Story 18. The husband of one of the women he was cheating on me with called me at work. At first I did not believe him and hung up. How could the man I had spent the past 8 years with, who fathered 2 beautiful children with me and with whom I had suffered the loss of 1 child, do something so hurtful? Still, part of me had doubts. He had affairs in other relationships, and we had a rocky patch early on when I suspected an affair but had no proof. I told my boss I felt sick and had to leave early. I called the man back and learned that my ex, his wife, and one of their friends had been sleeping together for about a year. The man had confronted my ex and said he would tell me, but my ex convinced him to wait a month because my mother had just died. I took my time coming home, confronted him, and told him to pack and leave. As I pieced together what had happened and the lies he told, I realized that if I had been in a different headspace, I might have noticed the affairs earlier. I also found hidden videos on one of our computers showing he was arranging sexual encounters in our apartment while I was at work and he was watching our daughter. That finally ended any possibility of reconciliation. Story 19. I found a used condom on the bathroom floor. I just emailed him a 30-day end of tenancy notice. I own the house. Story 20. I was married. Out of the blue, while at work, I got an email whose subject read my husband's name followed by wife. When I opened it, it listed a name and said my husband was married to her. The sender was overseas and English was not their first language. I checked Facebook. I found countless photos of a woman with my husband, the woman and her children, and her family with him. I was stunned. It was October 6, 2017, 7 months after I nearly died from an ectopic pregnancy. We were trying to have children at that point. After work, I went home and started throwing all his things into the dumpster. He was out of town, so I had plenty of time. I spent all of Saturday and Sunday throwing everything he owned into the dumpster. A month later, I moved to a new apartment and then told him I was divorcing him. He took his own life a few months later. Story 21. Oh, story time. Classic love at first sight. I loved you after 2 weeks. We moved in together after 2 months. Engaged after 6. We were together for 4 years and change. I left my rent control bachelor pad and picked a bigger apartment so she could have her art studio. We did everything together and split all bills 50-50. We had different jobs in the same industry and made about the same money. We really loved each other and, as cliché as it sounds, completed each other. I am very analytical and stoic and she is a liberal artist. She went to New York Comic Con as an exhibitor. I helped her pack and dropped her at the airport. Everything seemed fine. She should have been back in 4 days. She never came back home. She simply disappeared. She ghosted me. The day she should have been home, I freaked out that she might be dead, only to find myself blocked on everything. Email, phone, and social media. Everything I know comes from the unpaid bills she left behind, the credit card we shared that she stopped paying 2 months earlier, and her cell phone bill, which T-Mobile provided because the account was on my social security number. I found one New York City area code repeatedly in the call history and put 2 and 2 together. She had met him at San Diego Comic-Con a few months earlier and methodically planned to abandon me, take as much as she could to New York City, and never look back. She maxed our credit card and an Amazon card furnishing their new home in New York City. By the time grief gave way to practicality, it was too late for me to cancel everything. I literally had to log in and see all the houseware purchases made with my money for a house I will never live in. I could not stay in our place or afford our lifestyle on one income. It was 6 months of being blackout drunk, using Tinder, and overall self-loathing. I am sure I hurt other people in the process. It was not even the love that hurt most, but the flat-out betrayal and the financial damage. It took me over a year of living paycheck to pay all balances to zero. If you are reading this Fry, I do not hate you, but you destroyed my self-esteem. I cannot trust anyone ever again. You ripped my heart out, watched it die slowly, and did not care about the mess. Thanks for the wishes, but please do not hate her. To this day, all I wanted was to know why she did it and where I failed as a partner or as a man. I later became close friends with his ex, who wrote about him, and we shared stories and became good friends. That helped me a lot. Zoe, you rock. Who would have known my biggest heartbreak would blow up? Thanks for the support. Please do not hate her. I am not suing anyone. It has been about 2 years now, and to be honest, I would pay to know why she left more than to try to get my money back. The total was around $7,000, plus the cost of moving out and losing a nice rent-controlled condo. Money comes and goes. Lack of closure may last forever. It is crazy how much people can change in such a small amount of time. How you can think you know someone inside and out, but they can still surprise you in the worst ways. How they can say nasty, childish things when before you had so much respect for how they carried themselves and acted. Regardless of how much you prepare yourself, it still hurts. You have to remind yourself that not everyone has the same heart you do. And regardless of how angry it might make you, nothing is worth sinking to that level. Being the bigger person is always the only positive to come out of something so negative. Be safe out there. Story 22. It was a very unhealthy relationship. He was emotionally abusive and I was in a terrible place with my mental health. I found out at the ultrasound to determine the gender of our child. He was late and I was scrolling Facebook while waiting to be called. He had been tagged in photos from a gig the previous weekend. A woman appeared in all the pictures with him and they were physically intimate. In one photo they were making out in the background. He arrived after I was called in. While the technician was printing the images I told him I knew, he went on about how I was making it up, that he would never do that, and accused me of lying to cover up his cheating. When I pointed out the photos, he stormed out and left me there. My father had arrived during the appointment because he anticipated the man would react badly if we were having a girl. He did react badly and his response included denials of cheating. My father took me home. At that point, I considered us broken up and stopped all contact except for texts related to the pregnancy. Mostly, I was relieved. I had concrete evidence that it was not in my head and I finally escaped that relationship. Story 23. I caught my ex sexting another woman and telling her how he missed her on my birthday. I was young at the time and reacted by crying and yelling. If it happened now, I would just get up and leave. There is no point in trying to mend the relationship because it's nearly impossible to regain the trust that was lost. Thank you for the award. It's really sad how many people have gone through this same experience. I hope all of you are in a better place now. Story 24. I was in a long-term relationship for 3 years. I took him to the hospital because he had unexplained rashes. He was diagnosed with syphilis. I tested negative, but I was treated anyway. I was so stupid in my early 20s. Story 25. Funnily enough, the girl he was cheating on me with actually told me. She messaged me at 3 in the morning asking if I was still with my ex, and I said yes, he was asleep next to me. She told me what happened, sent me screenshots, and I grabbed his phone. I believed her but wanted to see it for myself. I left the room and looked through everything. He did not even try to hide it. I went back in, threw something at him to wake him, and confronted him. Of course he played dumb and pretended not to know who I was talking about. I pulled his phone out of my pocket and the look on his face was priceless. He knew it was over. I screamed at him, called him every name under the sun, and then he left the house. This was a year ago. A few months later, I was being told that he missed me. Pathetic. Edit. To make matters worse, I uprooted my life completely across the country to be with this man, and this is how it ended. Story 26. I could not find my then-wife after she got off work one evening. I tried to call her mobile phone, but there was no answer. She did not show up at the house until 9:30 p.m. She offered a story about getting stuck in traffic. I did some sleuthing and opened the State Farm Good Driver app, which tracks movements. I discovered she had been leaving work early, going to the nearby rest area off the expressway, and having sex with a 20-something truck driver she had met at her previous job. One afternoon, I decided to interrupt them. I went to the rest area, parked in front of his rig, and went straight to the door. The cabin shade was drawn. I pulled back the shade and saw my then-wife holding a meth pipe while performing oral sex on him. He had the gall to tell me to give them privacy. I did not handle it well. I called the police. Both were arrested for possession, and I promptly filed for divorce. A few months after I left, she cheated on her new trucker friend and was on her way to her 7th partner. Godspeed, you wet, musty nightmare. Story 27. About 6 months into recovery from being hit by a sport utility vehicle as a pedestrian, I had a severe traumatic brain injury with a Glasgow Coma Scale score of 4, a back broken in 3 places, legs broken in 2 places, and a pelvis broken in 2 places. I had moved back in with my then-girlfriend for about a week. We went to a party and I was left there because she could not find me. I did not know any of the people there. They were all her friends and none of them could help me get home. I was told she left with the group we arrived with. I managed to walk back to the apartment quite drunk, tired, and in pain from overusing my still recovering body. I banged on the door until my knuckles bled. A man answered, let me in, and then crawled back into bed next to her in my bed. I did not have the cognitive ability to deal with that, so I lay down on the floor next to the bed and passed out. She broke up with me the next day and blamed me for it. This story has more detail, but I do not want to relive that year of trauma in detail. Summary. I walked in from a party to find them in my bed. I lacked the cognitive ability to handle the situation, so I passed out on the floor next to them. Story 28. Back then, Facebook displayed on your profile things like "Don't say a word to" liked a photo and everything you did. I noticed he liked a photo of a girl who seemed to be someone he had recently added. I checked her profile and she acted like she had one because men cheated on their partners with her. Her profile was public, with photos of her and him and messages they exchanged. I engineered a way to befriend her roommate and learned she had been bringing other men home besides my boyfriend. When I confronted him, I told him who else she had been sleeping with and urged him to get tested for sexually transmitted diseases. Story 29. It was the day before my 18th birthday. My boyfriend told me he had planned to take me out in his Mazda pickup truck that we named Sparky and get some food from a bigger city down south. We were going to make a whole evening of it. I went to school, had a good day, and nothing seemed off. I got home from school at 3:30 p.m. and waited. I called and got no answer. By 9:30 or 10 p.m., I gave up. I got on the computer and found out through a mutual friend that he was at another friend's house. We were friends with her, and her home life was terrible. Her parents treated their children like punching bags. She had been talking about moving out with her little brother. I got in my mom's car, drove over there, and found them having sex on the living room couch. I went home, told my mom he was not allowed in the house, that I was not accepting his calls, and that I was going to bed. I told her what had happened and that I wanted to deal with it in the morning. The next morning he came over as if nothing had happened and greeted me. He tried to hug me, but I backed away. He asked what was wrong, and I told him he had missed my birthday night out because he had chosen to sleep with someone else. He accused me of stalking him, of cheating on him, and of being a controlling bitch. He tried to gaslight me. I told him I was done. He had made his choice, and now he would have to live with it. I told our mutual friends that we had broken up over disagreements. One mutual friend who had been at the house decided to spread it around school that the other girl was a better lay than I was. So yeah. Story 30. My now ex-husband demanded constant access to all my social media and cell phone messages and constantly accused me of cheating without reason. I had nothing to hide and never even thought of cheating. I was watching our young children around the clock and did not have transportation because he had accidentally totaled my car. One day I handed him my phone to check for other men and asked to see his. He hesitated but then handed it over. There was a long sexual text history with one of the teenage girls who worked for him. He told me he was in love with her and wanted her to move in with us. I was in total shock and dropped his phone, cracking it. He retaliated by breaking my laptop. He is a wonderful man, and I miss him every day. I am being sarcastic. Story 31. I had come home from a 5-month cruise. My girlfriend at the time was a court stenographer. When she wasn't at the pier, I figured she had a case or was catching up on transcripts. I got a ride from a friend and saw an unfamiliar BMW, Bayerisch Motor and Werke, in my driveway. I walked in and found her performing oral sex on a stranger on my couch. This was my house, not hers. I didn't say a word. I started grabbing her things and throwing them in the front yard. I called her father to pick her up because her car was an old Quattro and was in the shop again. Up to that point, I had been letting her drive my car until hers was fixed. I won't go into the rest of the drama, but she was taken by the authorities instead of her father. Story 32. I dated a girl for about 2 years. About 18 months into the relationship, we were talking about moving in together. Then, out of nowhere, she became distant and irritable, and we ended up breaking up. About 3 months after the breakup, I found that Facebook has a section where messages from non-friends are kept. It turned out my then-girlfriend was having sex with her ex and the United Parcel Service driver who delivered to her store at the mall. She ended up getting together with the United Parcel Service driver and his 3 children. Last I checked, they are miserable, and it brings me joy every time I think about it. In my messages was a note from the United Parcel Service driver's then-wife. My ex not only cheated but broke up a marriage. Story 33. We got married when I was 17 and he was 21. He was shipping off to sea, and I was escaping a bad home life. When he came back after his deployment, he wasn't the same person. After about 6 months, he gained weight on purpose to fail his physicals so he would get kicked out of the Navy. A year later, I was working full-time while he stayed home, watching anime and drinking during the day, and telling me he was applying to jobs. I was applying to universities when my laptop died. I asked to use his to finish an application, and while doing so a message popped up on his Facebook. It was a topless picture from his ex. I was shocked to find they had been seeing each other for a long time. They had started again while he was at sea. He would talk to her and not to me, saying he never had time to email. She had sent him the picture because he had said he missed having large breasts like hers and that mine were too small, so he felt like he was having sex with a boy or a child. I confronted him. He made pitiful excuses. I had friends come to the house that day and kick him out while I went to work. He then stalked me for the next few years and made posts on his Facebook calling me a coward. He sent emails and called from blocked numbers to tell me a restraining order was just a piece of paper or that our vows before God made me his property. Then he bought a gun and started telling our friends that if he couldn't have me, no one could. I ended up talking to our friends, gave everyone conflicting information about where I was going, and moved to another state. I deleted all my personal social media accounts and lived in fear for years, watching him continually make memes about how he loved his wife and would do anything for her. It took 8 years for me to finally get the divorce. Story 34. A friend of mine suspected her husband of cheating because he kept saying he was playing soccer with friends. He often came home already showered, as if he had been sweating while playing. One day she sewed his soccer socks together. When he came back freshly showered, she saw the socks were still sewn together, which proved he had not been playing soccer. She later confronted him and he admitted he was cheating. Many people noted that finding clean socks would have been enough evidence. She probably did not think of that. Story 35. This is an almost verbatim account of the conversation. Me. Are you sleeping with someone? Her. Yes. Me. Do you want a divorce? Her. Kind of. Me. Okay. I will file tomorrow. Story 36. She told me I was not a real man and that was why she did it. She listed everything she hated about me, then pulled over, kicked me out of the car, and I had to walk back to my place. As for my reaction, I went home, cried, went to bed, stayed in bed for a few days, felt like a terrible person for a few weeks, cut my holiday leave short, and returned to work early to get my mind off things. This was a while ago, and I am definitely in a much better place in my life now. Story 37. I was at work and tried to call my boyfriend, but he wasn't answering. After a few hours, I had a horrible feeling. It stressed me out so badly that I started to cry, and my boss let me go home. The whole way home, I felt a serious dread. I walked into the house and into my bedroom, and he was lying in bed half-clothed with a naked woman. A huge blow-up followed. After everything settled, this motherfucker tried to tell me that he went to the movies alone and she followed him home. Even if I believed she just followed him home and got naked, you let her do it, so what's the point of saying that to me? It was a horrible, abusive relationship and it didn't end then. I eventually broke up with him, but not on the spot like I should have. If I could change anything, it would be that I wish I had broken up with that guy sooner. That was over 10 years ago. Edit. Your responses are fucking hilarious. I have never laughed so much about this situation. Story 38. I found out he had signed up for a number of apps such as Ashley Madison, Tinder, and Bumble. He would message mutual acquaintances asking if they would be up for massages and similar arrangements. I blamed myself for years, thinking he was not interested in sex with me because I had had a baby and gained some weight. That was not the case. He simply enjoyed contacting other women for sex more. We are in the middle of our divorce now. He does not understand why I am ending our marriage over his indiscretions. Note: never say you are single on Reddit because of possible direct messages. Story 39. This first started back in December. Right before we went on a holiday trip to see my family, she started acting somewhat off, kind of distant, and easily aggravated. I had a suspicion that something was going on, and I'm embarrassed to admit that I snooped on her Apple Watch. I found some incriminating texts she had with a friend, so I confronted her in January. She told me that she kissed a guy she works with and that was it. We were having issues in our relationship, and I chose to forgive her. We decided to try working on those issues. Fast forward to this past May. She broke down and said she had not been honest with me and that she had actually had sex with this other man. We split after the news. We had been together 8 years and had been engaged for almost 2 years. Our wedding date was supposed to be yesterday. Still killing me. I don't even know where to go from here. 2020 can go eat a dick. Edit. Whoa, I did not expect this to blow up. Thanks for the awards and kind words. I'm trying to upvote and respond to everyone I can. Story 40. I went to bed and left my husband and a mutual female friend downstairs drinking. Later, I went down to say one last good night. They were outside smoking. When I opened the back door, they fell on top of me. Their clothes were being removed, and her lipstick was all over his face and neck. We are in the middle of a divorce. Story 41. I had my suspicions, but it was her who ended up telling me. I went into the relationship thinking, wow, I don't deserve this girl. She's way out of my league. She repeatedly reminded me how much better he was and made sure to rub it in my face. I spiraled into deep depression. For someone with very low self-esteem, being cheated on is one of the worst feelings. It feels like it confirms all your worst thoughts about yourself. Update. Thanks to everyone who offered encouraging comments. This happened years ago, and I am now in a happy relationship. I still struggle with depression, and I think I would be depressed even without this incident, but I am working on it. To anyone currently experiencing this, it is not the end of the world, even if it feels that way. You are worth more than you know, and you will see that someday. Story 42. I was in a relationship for 6 years. We broke up 1 month before our wedding because I found out my fiancé had cheated on me. 2 years into our relationship, many small suspicious acts added up. The biggest was that condoms were missing from my drawer. I confronted my fiancé. I was very sad, angry, and confused. She denied any affair. For years went by, and about a month before our wedding she broke down and confessed that she had slept with her ex-boyfriend because she was depressed and looking for a way to feel something. That broke my heart. I was also in the middle of an intense workday from home and had to continue working with that on my mind. I had always felt she had been lying to me over the years, and she showed an undying jealousy toward all of my friends who were women. She was clearly projecting. It hurt that she had cheated on me, but it hurt way worse that she had lied to me for 4 years and gone along with planning the wedding. I am grateful that she told me before the wedding, and we called it off because of the mistrust and many other problems in our relationship. We met at a young age, so that is not a big surprise. I genuinely believe she was going through heavy emotional turmoil from her past, so I do not take it entirely personally. I wish her well. With that said, I have cut off all communication because I could not trust her after that. All's well that ends well. I have met the love of my life, and we plan to get married as soon as the coronavirus disease 2019 pandemic subsides and it is safe to gather in groups again. Story 43. I caught my wife after she passed away from cancer. It was the worst feeling ever, caught between unending love, mourning, and absolute anger. Story 44. He was sorting through his pictures and a naked woman caught my eye. Later that day, I went through his phone and found many nude pictures and screenshots from Snapchat. I also found pictures of myself I did not know he had taken. I called my best friend and cried. She told me to confront him, so I did. He said it was normal for men to keep pornography on their phones and was smug until I mentioned the images were screenshots. Story 45. I visited my long-distance boyfriend in Nebraska over spring break because he was stationed there. Before I knew anything, I met and had lunch with the woman he was cheating with. I sat next to her while he sat across from us, and I later hung out twice more with the same group, including his coworkers and friends. I could tell she did not like me, but I brushed it off because I was there for my boyfriend and did not care about her feelings. Later that week, I asked to send a message from his phone to a mutual close friend and saw walls of messages from her giving him an ultimatum to end our relationship. He and that woman had been texting all week. He used the same pet names for her that he used for me and told her she was the most beautiful woman after she sent him photos of her outfits and selfies, even when he was in the same room in bed with me. He ended that relationship and we agreed to work on ours. After I flew home, he continued seeing her and having sex with her, and he gaslit me during our video calls, making me feel like I had cheated on him. After 2 weeks of indecision about the status of our relationship, I broke up with him. No one is worth the mental strain of being cheated on. Story 46. All these answers are about people who caught their spouses cheating. However, I briefly became the other woman without knowing it, and it has never sat right with me. I was young, single, and going through a family crisis when a sibling died unexpectedly. I met a man who was fun, seemed great, and very busy, which was exactly what I wanted, while grieving and not wanting anything serious. After 4 months of romance, I found out he was married with small children. We were with his colleagues after work at a bar when a coworker asked him where his wife was. I kept my cool and did not make a scene, but once the drinks were over I brought it up and told him how terrible that made me feel. I ended up ghosting him. I was not in the mental state to deal with any fallout, so I stopped replying to messages. I should have contacted his wife, but I did not want to play relationship police. At the time, I was under a lot of stress and grief and had my own problems and emotions to deal with. 5 years later, I still feel terrible for his wife whenever I think about what happened. Sometimes I consider contacting her to tell her, but I do not know if it is the right move or even worth it. Story 47. My ex thought he had deleted the texts. I didn't usually go through his phone, but I suspected he was seeing someone else because of his behavior, hiding his phone, and staying late at work. I was really hurt and mostly angry at myself for being foolish enough to date him. I had been warned he was no good, but I wanted to fix him and ended up hurt like the others. I asked him for an explanation. He tried to cover it and lied to my face. I immediately told him to get out of my house, and he left. He responded by saying very personal things about me on Twitter. It was a really bad time, and I hadn't done anything wrong. I picked myself up, found the courage to apply for a job at a larger company a few hours away, and moved to a bigger city. It was there that I met my now husband. A couple of years later, when I was first dating my husband, my ex messaged me trying to make amends and said he missed me. I ignored it, and it felt so good to be able to say no. I'm blessed. That experience pushed me forward and helped me more than he knows. If that hadn't happened, I don't think I would have applied for that job, left my hometown, or met my husband. The universe has a funny way of making things work out in the end. Story 48. The story is remarkable because it happened before the internet was widely available in the very early 1990s, when the world seemed much bigger. My fiancée, Meg, had 1 semester left of college that had to be taken as an internship abroad for her major. She chose to go to Belgium for the internship. I stayed behind, and the plan was that I would set up a house, and when she returned that summer she would move in and we would set a date for our wedding. While Meg was in Europe, calling every couple of weeks to check in. Long-distance calls were very expensive then. Sending me postcards and letters, I moved into a brownstone, bought furniture, and settled in. About 2 weeks before Meg was supposed to return, I stopped into a nearby coffee house I had noticed down the block but had not yet visited. To my surprise, I found that my neighbor from growing up in a completely different city, Claire, was a waitress there. We had not seen each other since high school, so we planned to meet after her shift for coffee to catch up. Claire told me she was engaged to a man named Ben, who was completing his studies with an internship in Belgium. I told her about my fiancé and that they had to know each other. A couple of days later, I stopped in for coffee and Claire looked extremely upset. She asked if I could wait. She had a break coming up and needed to talk. Outside, she told me she had received a call from her Aunt Sue the day before. Aunt Sue had just returned from Czechoslovakia and said something strange had happened. While touring Prague, Sue and her travel group had stayed in a local hotel, and the next morning Sue had run into Claire's fiancé, Ben, in the lobby with a woman named Meg. He introduced the woman as a student from America who worked with him, but they both looked terrified. Claire immediately called long distance to Belgium. After several tries over the course of a day, she reached him. He said he had been kind of expecting her call and admitted that he had been seeing Meg for most of their time in Europe, spending weekends and holidays traveling together. I was stunned. I went home and started calling Meg at her dorm in Belgium, finally reaching her late at night, early morning for her. I asked her directly if she was dating Ben. I did not explain how I knew. She hesitated as if I were crazy for saying it. But when I said I knew Claire, she dropped the pretense and admitted everything. Ben and Meg had a very bittersweet homecoming. Meg got off easier than Ben because Claire had already left all of his belongings on the front lawn the day she found out. They had been pretty picked over by the time he returned 2 weeks later. I did pick Meg up from the airport. At the time, I wanted to see her face when I told her that all our friends knew what a piece of shit she was and that I never wanted to see her again. I still marvel at how many astounding coincidences led to Meg and Ben being caught. The universe works in incredible and mysterious ways. Story 49. She walked dogs for work and said she was going on late-night walks. She was reckless and had her pictures synced to the children's iPad. My daughter asked me, "Daddy, who is this?" My kids and I left to see my mother. While she denied everything, I received a Nest notification that there was movement in the apartment. I opened the app and saw him there. She had taken down all the family pictures. I could hear and watch them having sex. I sat and breathed heavily in anger. I called her. She denied it and said she was at work. I found out who he was from her Facebook likes. I messaged him the family pictures I had just spent $500 on. He replied with a thumbs up and blocked me. I found his business website. He was a life coach, which I found absurd. I emailed him. He wrote a long apology saying she had lied to him. I tried to forgive her for the sake of the children. It was a Saturday morning and I wanted to take the kids to the park together. She said she had to work. Her iPad was still synced to her phone. When we returned, the children wanted to FaceTime their grandmother. I opened the app and saw she had called him while claiming to be at work. She finally confessed. We had a huge fight and she blamed me, saying that a wife with a good husband would not cheat. She then hit me in front of the children and threw my phone and keys off the 4th floor balcony, saying it was my fault. I moved out. Not a day goes by without her begging and pleading for us to get back together. Now love feels like trauma, and I cannot let anyone love me without assuming something sinister. I do not care about her at all. It makes me want to throw up whenever she speaks to me. It is difficult because I will have to deal with her for the sake of the children. Thanks a bunch for sticking around till the end of the video. Remember to subscribe, and until next time, stay awesome and goodbye.